There is a country within a country in the United States, as members of the group calling themselves Chaz have taken over areas in both Seattle and Portland. To talk more about it is one of our regular contributors, reporter Lisa Daftari, joining me from Los Angeles. Lisa, in Washington State, Seattle protesters have set up an autonomous zone after police evacuated a precinct. What is going on here?
Yeah, this is what it would look like all over the country, and we have internationally people calling to defund police stations and just the police department in general. This is what it would look like, complete anarchy. And I thought about that this morning, that you guys are looking right down below the border and seeing that this is happening so close to Canada. Complete anarchy, complete anarchy. For now, they're very happy. It's like a carnival, right? They're passing out food and there's music and there's street festivals. This is the influence, or I should say the side effect of the protests that we've been having in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder. And, you know, this country has just been in perpetual protest mode. We've had 3 weekends of protesting, which has led to a calling to defund police. And this area has actually done that. They've completely, the police has moved out. They've moved in. They call this area Chaz, C-H-A-Z. And it's exactly that, the influence of Black Lives Matters, Occupy Black Lives Matters, Antifa, of course, which is this, you know, anti-fascist, anti-government movement that has just jumbled together every social justice movement you can think of, and what does it result in? Complete anarchy, being anti-government, being anti-police, being anti-establishment, being anti the president. You know, and how does a society run in this way? What are the long-term effects of such a thing? And you know, in the short run, this is being celebrated by those who support it and by those who are just witnessing something. It's so out of the norm, just like everything else we're experiencing in 2020, whether it be COVID or the protests or the looting. It's just so surreal that I think a lot of people are just, you know, they don't even know how to react to this. But again, this is complete anarchy. It's nothing to celebrate. It's nothing to aspire to. And we'll see what the long-term effects will be, especially in an area like this.
So Lisa, what it seems like police have lost control of over these various districts is maybe the military potentially going to be brought in?
Well, not yet, but we might be leading or heading in that direction. What the government has been very reluctant to do, different police departments, what you're watching and what we're all witnessing here in the protests, is that there's a reluctance to escalate because of what may happen in the retaliation. Just here in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills, in the residential district on Friday night, it's called Occupy BLM, Occupy Black Lives Matters, a group of 50 or more individuals with a lot of motorcycles, a lot of bullhorns, a lot of tear gas, went into the they made sure to go into residential areas, wake people up in the middle of the night, and, you know, create this ruckus. And the Beverly Hills Police Department, which is known to be extremely tough, extremely punctual, they you know, they're a good police department. They basically, you know, they were standing down. They weren't responding as quickly or as aggressively as they would have. They were able to put an end to it, but it did last much longer than it would under any other circumstances. And this only goes to show, just like the looting, just like the rioting we've seen for 3 weeks, you know, I think, you know, the leadership is just, you know, reluctant to really escalate things. So the military won't be called in. I know National Guard was called into Los Angeles and to different parts of the country, but you know, the reluctance is, you know, it's warranted because they want this to go away sooner rather than later. They don't want to call out more people in reaction to any retaliation that may happen.
Now, Atlanta police have released a body cam video leading up to the death of Rayshard Brooks. The police killing of 27-year-old Brooks in Atlanta was ruled a homicide. Lisa, what do we know of Brooks? And this cannot really help police community relations with an already tense situation in many communities across the United States.
Right. The timing of this couldn't be any worse. Does it illustrate more police brutality? Perhaps, but under other circumstances, would we give this story a fairer chance to understand what the police were experiencing? And let me explain. You know, I think people are so quick to say, "Oh, are you taking the side of the police? You know, this is police brutality. The guy didn't need to be killed because he was drunk at a Wendy's." Well, yes, but he did steal a weapon from the police officer. I've read reports that he was drunk to the extent that he was completely belligerent, completely combative. He wasn't, parts of this are on the video and parts are not. So you do see in the video that he is resisting arrest. He does take the weapon from the officer. He does run away, and he does turn around to point that weapon at the officer. And under normal circumstances, for a police officer to use a taser, it's considered a weapon. But in this case, they're not calling it a weapon when it's in the hands of the perpetrator. So they're saying that, well, he just had a taser. Why shoot him? And again, we're in very, very sensitive times. These are the tensions are high. So right then and there that night, that same Wendy's where this man was found was burned to the ground. And, what did this poor Wendy's do? If anything, they had this inconvenience of having this drunk man fall asleep in their drive-through, and he had to be removed. And then they had to have their business burned down. What do we know about him? He's the father of four. He's being painted out to be the quintessential father, and it was his daughter's birthday the next day. They were waiting for him at home. Well, then why was he drunk? So there's a lot of that doesn't add up. Now, should he have been killed? I mean, who knows? I think that is for experts and people who need to look at not just bits and pieces, but the entire story. And that's the problem. I mean, it's the blessing and the problem this day and age. You have smartphones, you have the dash cam from the officers. You have a lot of technology, but there's also a chance for it to be edited. There's also a chance for it to be just a part of the whole picture. So I think this warrants much more investigation. But again, under the current timing of the situation, it's being looked at as another case of police brutality against an African-American man.
Let's circle back to the death of George Floyd for just a moment here. It's impacted many people around the world, including us here in Canada. Now, Lisa, in Japan and New Zealand, they're not only mourning the man, but are seeking change. What kinds of change?
Yeah, I think this is being seen as, a huge catalyst to end any sort of racism around the world. Now, every country in their own right and in their own perception looks at racism very differently. In one country, it might be a black-skinned person. In another country, it might be someone of a different faith or a different ethnicity. So, all around the world, this is being seen as how can we do better? How can we look at this as a teachable moment? Ironically, in Iran, of all places, where everyone is discriminated against, I mean, the human rights record there is just egregious. Women are discriminated against. Gays don't even exist in their minds. Blacks, I mean, across the board, there are awful human rights record. And they have a street called George Floyd Boulevard already in honor of George Floyd. And they're pointing fingers at the United States saying that they have a problem. We have a problem here with racism. So it's being both used and abused around the world as really a calling of sorts to reflect and see how everyone can do better.
It's interesting. I have an ex-colleague who I worked with in television in Toronto who moved to Tokyo, Japan, and he told me he had a hard time going into local restaurants. They had signs saying no foreigners allowed. Renting an apartment complex, the same thing, big signs, no foreigners allowed in Tokyo, Japan. And now people in Tokyo who are demonstrating say their own country must deal with its own race problems, and it's pretty deep.
Yeah, I believe it. I've never visited Japan, but I believe it because, as I said, I think every country experiences racism in a different way, and their perception of what is acceptable is different. If you live in Sweden, you see normal as one thing, and if you live in the continent of Africa, you see normal as another. But I think again, this is being looked at as a moment that can bring about a lot of change. It's very ironic. This man, George Floyd, is being celebrated in so many ways, and not that he deserved to be killed. That was absolutely a case of police brutality, a case of an arrest that went way too far, the violence that was not justified. And I can't say that enough, and I can't emphasize that enough. But at the end of the day, the man had a criminal record. The man is not somebody who, you look at and want him to be the Gandhi of our time, but yet he has been so symbolic for so many countries and so many different movements that call upon his name and are seeing him as this symbolic face of change. I think it's just warranted. I think we've come to the time come to a time and place in history where we're thinking to ourselves, it's 2020. how did we get here? How did we get here? How are we still wearing face masks to walk into the public? And how are we still discriminating against X, Y, and Z, whatever that may be, skin color, ethnicity, eye color, hair color, etc.
Yeah, let's talk about that COVID-19 pandemic, another real issue in our society right now. Not far from you is Disneyland in Anaheim, and critics say reopening the Magical Kingdom, Lisa, too soon could be devastating during the coronavirus pandemic. Thousands have signed a petition asking to delay the July opening. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, people are worried. Look, when you think of big masses of people gathering, Disneyland is one of the places that comes to mind. On a given random Monday afternoon, that place will be packed to the brim. And you just don't want people to be, in such close quarters. And I think that when you look at, the aftermath, when places start to open up, we still have to be careful, right? We don't have vaccines yet. Dr. Fauci, who's the foremost expert on all of this, says it'll be at least a year before things are normal. And that is, assuming that there actually even will be a vaccine. So it won't be within the fall or the winter. And now we're looking at a July 17th opening for Disneyland. So it will gather a lot of people, even though they're saying that it is by reservation only. So they're going to admit far fewer people than usual. And temperatures will be checked. I don't know how they're going to really enforce this system with so many people coming in with such a demand. I think kids have been too excited to get back to Disneyland. And, I get it. I get both sides. People are excited to get back to life as usual. It's summertime. What do you do with your children when there's no camp and there's no recreation really? And at the same time, we don't want this pandemic to have a second wave. So both sides are really warranted here.
Now, the state of Florida just witnessed 2 consecutive days of more than 2,000 cases of the coronavirus, with more beaches opening.
Exactly. So this is a great example of what will happen, or what has been happening here in the United States. With summertime, temperatures go up, people want to get out, people have been cooped up. And then when you think about it, you're like, well, I'm just going to the beach, I'm going outdoors, I'm going to a park, I'm going to an amusement park, I'm going to a festival, and people gather. And when people gather, I think the thing about getting out of quarantine is that you kind of lose that vulnerability, and you get back out there, and this is what happens. The numbers also start climbing again.
Now, the state of Texas also recorded its highest number of COVID-19 hospitalizations so far during the outbreak.
Right. This is a very surprising statistic, right alongside Florida. We saw big cities have these kinds of numbers, LA and New York being two of the the highest numbers in terms of COVID cases. But now you're seeing it in other places that aren't as populated. And again, temperatures are up, people are out, and people are less careful. I think what happens here is that, I think when people are told a certain number of people will contract this virus, a certain percentage of the population will contract this virus, and people are at home, businesses are closed for a long period of time, and that doesn't really come to fruition, meaning we just went under that number. When you get back out there, you think, well, is this really that bad? Or I'm outside, this can't be that bad. So unfortunately, I think we will experience a second wave here in the United States, and the cases that you're stating are evident of that.
Europe is taking a step towards a new normal as many countries are opening their borders, but only to fellow Europeans or Germans who want a holiday maybe in Spain or Portugal. After 3 months of coronavirus lockdowns, Lisa, tourists from the US, Asia, and Latin America will have to wait a little bit longer, however, to go to Europe.
Yeah, lucky the Europeans who can cross borders and be in a completely different environment. It's nice for them. But at the same time, this is one measure that the European nations can take to avoid so many tourists coming in. I mean, they have to draw the line somewhere, and not allowing, tourists from other continents is one move they can make in order to kind of draw some sort of line, some sort of boundaries to prevent so much mixing, so many people coming in. And again, they really had it bad, particularly in Spain and in Italy, where they flattened the curve, but after so many deaths and so many cases, so they're just getting back up. But again, remember, tourism is a big part of the economy in Europe, particularly the summers. And if they don't allow this, the economy to pick up and open up back again, they're going to have a lot of trouble getting a lot of those businesses back up and running.
And in Pakistan, government officials there say COVID-19 cases could rise to 1.2 million by the end of July.
Yes, and what's ironic about places like Pakistan and India rising in cases is the heat. You know, we've been told that the heat actually will kill this virus, and particularly in humid places, the humidity kills this virus. Dry heat will not. That's at least what we were told. So in places like Pakistan, India, where it is very hot, where it is very humid, where they did not have so many cases, now you're seeing a lot more cases. But let's also remember that per capita, they're still on the lower end. There's just a lot of people and they're very densely populated. So that's why you're seeing such a surge in these cases.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Stay safe, Lisa.
You too.